Now, I notice, wherever I go in the world, actually, that upper middle class career women are very unhappy. They're very unhappy, okay, even though they have achieved a certain status.
Weird.
What I'm saying is that feminists have to stop blaming men for their own unhappiness. The unhappiness is due, I believe, to huge systemic changes that women, for thousands of years, women had their own world. There was the world of women, and there was the world of men. And the sexes didn't have that much to do with each other, okay? This is a brand new experiment to have this new system where now women can be economically independent now. They're no longer dependent on father or husband or brother, okay, for their sustenance, right? And they're working side by side with men in the workplace, right? This is an experiment. It's never happened before, right? I was saying in the book that we may have to accept a certain amount of tension between the sexes in the workplace. Right? The feminist idea that if we can just suppress men enough, women will be happy. I say no, okay? I say, okay, and it's on the basis of my own experience as a child in Italian-American immigrant community, okay, is that what women have lost is the old solidarity that they once had when they totally ruled the private sphere. The women's life all day long was with other women once, multi-generational, older women, okay, as well as the children, right? It was a huge tribal experience. And now what women are feeling is a sense of isolation and loneliness, disconnection, okay, from their old function. I'm not saying to go back. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying stop blaming men, all right? Like, for example, these marches that just happened, okay? The women were exhilarated. They were almost hysterical, okay? I don't think it had anything to do with feminism or anti-Trump or anything like that. I thought it was that women suddenly felt that surge of happiness again for being with other women, all right? You can actually see it in the Odyssey when Odysseus is washed up naked and alone. He's lost his ship, on the shores of Phaeacia, and he wakes to the sound of women's voices, laughing and singing and so on. It's the Princess Nausicaa going down to do the laundry on the shore. Okay? And actually, that is exactly what was going on up until fairly recently, where women were all together. They did all their chores together. They did the laundry. They did the cooking. I can remember this from my childhood in Endicott, New York, upstate New York. Among the immigrant Italian women, all four of my grandparents, plus my mother, were born in Italy. And so I actually had that experience, the experience that went on for thousands of years in the agrarian era. Women all together. In fact, my mother described as a small child in Italy how all the women would get together to do the laundry and go up the hill to Il Sorgo, which was a fountain cut out of the side of the mountain. Probably went back thousands of years to the Roman period and so on. She remembered the singing, the picnicking, et cetera, okay? So even though people were laboring physically in the agrarian era, there was a happiness, okay, a sense of identity. There was no quest for identity. Now, it's no place for an independent thinker, okay? If you were an independent thinker, you had no options as a woman except to become a nun. Okay, so I know it would have been a nun, okay, 100 years ago. All right, I know it, okay. And obviously, communities are intellectually repressive in their own way. Nevertheless, we're in a period now of quest for identity, tremendous pressures on young people to form their own identity separate from those old automatic tribal and community affiliations. So I think there's a tremendous, as a classroom teacher, of now, more than 40 years, I can see this, and it's really, there's a tremendous sense of psychological dislocation among young people, and they find many ways to try to achieve some sorts of identity. And part of it right now, of course, is social media, which is causing the total, entropy in terms of ability to reason, to read, to write, the old things.
She hates it.
So on. All right. Now, I'm also calling for an end to this insanity of excluding biology, okay, from gender studies. Now, how in the world did this happen, all right? How did women's studies and gender studies end up teaching about gender without any reference whatever to biology or to hormones, right? And right now, poststructuralism dominates gender studies everywhere. You know, I spent 6 months writing my dissection of Foucault, okay, what was that, 27 years ago. Now, assignment, hello, anyone who thinks that Foucault is somehow, you know, the master of the universe has clearly not read my exposure of him in Junk Bonds and Corporate Raiders, all right? I mean, the man was a fraud. I'm sorry, okay? Compared to Freud, okay? I mean, Freud is out and Foucault is in. All right? The post-structuralists, all right, you know, pose as leftists, okay? But what were they doing in the past few decades with this crazy parasitic growth of this administrator master class, okay, that has taken over the universities, right, in a period of obscene, okay, rise in tuition costs, student debt that's crippling families and so on. Where were these leftists, the great leftists, okay, on our college campuses, okay? Were they resisting the administrators, okay? Were they denouncing student debts, okay? Were they lamenting, you know, the plight of adjunct teachers and so on? No. They were all running to conferences, talking about Foucault with their stupid elitist jargon. Okay, and I mean, you think they thought that's leftism? Okay, these post-structuralists are the worst mercenary careerists. Okay, in this country, right? The leading post-structuralists, okay, and new historicists are retiring as multi-millionaires. And they pose as leftists. Okay, it is a scandal. Forget Foucault, for heaven's sakes. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. Okay, so we have to bring biology and authentic study of, you know, of medicine, of anthropology, of history, you know, back into gender studies. That's one thing I'm definitely calling for. Now, aside from these things, okay, there are a number. I'm on the warpath against, okay, the bureaucracy of the campuses. Okay, at Bennington College, my first job in the 1970s, we actually, in 1976, we had an uprising, okay, as faculty against the trustees and the administrators, the president of that college, and it was like huge, publicized. Nora Ephron went up there and wrote it up for, you know, for Esquire magazine and so on. And the faculties are totally castrated. What are they doing? The faculties have absolutely been marginalized in this country. And they didn't utter a peep as this administrator masterclass took over. The administrators who are in league with federal mandates, with federal authorities in Washington. I mean, we're living in an age of Stalinism right now. Okay, and again, the leftists have, you know, they talk a big talk. Okay, but they do nothing where it really matters. Okay, which is demand 50% reduction in the number of administrators, okay, and also 75% reduction in their salaries, okay, which often exceeds that of the faculty members. People should realize how many of the ills that I'm decrying about the suppression of speech and free thought on campus are coming from administrators, okay, who are these social welfare do-gooders. Oscar Wilde, okay, was absolutely scathing about these humanitarians, these aggressive philanthropists who dominated the Victorian period. All right. At any rate, in terms of other things in the book, there's a reprint of what I consider an important piece of mine in Time magazine, where I called for the end of this outrageous age 21 law in the United States, where young people cannot buy a beer. Okay, this is do you know nowhere in the world except in very repressive regimes, right? Like the United Arab Emirates and so on. Is there anything like that? Okay. What exactly? What mothers against drunk driving? Okay, they wandered into an area here that has been extremely destructive. When that rule was passed in 1984, okay, what did young people do? Unable now to drink, okay, they began taking the club drugs, of course, okay, ecstasy and ketamine and all this crap that they take into their bodies, right? And what's happened to the ability, of young people to go to a bar, learn how to drink in a sensible way in an adult context, be able to sit with the opposite sex, learn how to talk, how to flirt, discuss ideas, okay? It has absolutely a cruel law. No one has raised, you can buy marijuana in Colorado, right? And young people can't get a glass of beer, okay, when they arrive in college. Do you realize how outrageous that is? Now, why aren't you more outraged, okay? That has to end. All right. Oh yeah. So just to return to what I was saying about the the solidarity of women in the agrarian period. I think that probably part of my ability to analyze things comes from my exposure to almost like kind of a capsule condensed version of human history. I experienced the agrarian era through my contact with those powerful country women who had immigrated, and there's a whole piece in my book about Southern women, okay, about the power of the rural paradigm and the strength of Southern women and so on. But we were, a whole town of us really from Italy, concentrated in this area of the Triple Cities in upstate New York because of the shoe factories, the Endicott Johnson shoe factories. So I then had a direct experience of the industrial era, which followed the agrarian era. That when my grandfather, everyone in the town went to the factories, which dominated Endicott with their smokestacks in that period before environmental laws. The soot would be heavy, on windowsills. You could smell the tanning pools and so on. So I had the experience of the industrial era, and then my father, fresh out of the paratroopers in World War II, was able to go to college on the GI Bill. I was born while he was in college. My parents married at 20 and had me at 21. So he was like mopping the cafeteria floor, the only member of his large family to go to college. Then he became a high school teacher and then a professor at Lemoyne College in Syracuse. So we moved into the surface sector, economy, right? So in my own life, I've experienced all these transitions in human history. So I think it's given me a kind of insight into change. Now, what I'm saying in the book is that those women, the country women, were more powerful, than any feminist. They were physically powerful, literally, in that period before automatic washers and dryers. Everyone did laundry by hand. I can remember my grandmother washing on the back porch with a washboard. They were powerful like this, right? And these women had big voices, and big attitudes. Right? So, in fact, once when my father was teaching high school in the small farming town of Oxford, New York, we lived for a year in the upper floor of a farmhouse, and there was like a hilarious moment. My father was out with his brother. They were standing outside smoking a cigarette, and suddenly the farm woman yelled at them. A calf had escaped from the barn, and she said, "Stop her!" To my father and my uncle, and the calf thundered by. My father and my uncle just stepped backwards as it went by, and the farm woman chased the calf and came back carrying the calf. Right, and as she's passed them, she said, "Men." Those were the women. For thousands of years, country women had physical power and mental power, and they were the equals of men. In fact, it's no coincidence that the first states and territories to give women the right to vote were in the West. That was the pioneer areas. Where it was obvious that women were the equals of men. Whereas right to the very end, the educated states, the states where the great universities were, like Pennsylvania, New York State, Massachusetts, and so on, refused to grant women the right to vote. Not until the constitutional amendment was passed in 1920. It's because the differential between the upper middle class man and upper middle class woman, in the late 19th century and early 20th century, was very profound. A lady seemed to be a different entity, seemed to be far more emotional, tended to faint, tended to be rather delicate, etc. All right, so the idea of granting such women, however admirable, the right to vote, was not as easy as it was for the territories.
Ooh, makes you think. Makes you think. We're infantilizing women again. Women are getting even weaker. What she talks about, the agrarian period and experiencing that, I did too, growing up partially in Romania. I would see the separation of a man's world and a woman's world. All the women, all my aunts, grandmothers, mom, sisters, all of them, all in the kitchen, all or in the yard picking the fruits and the vegetables, just preparing meals or chores, like she was saying, washing clothes, all that stuff. But all the women in their own world, and they enjoyed their own like levels of power, the hierarchy,
yeah.
right? Where the grandmother was like the matriarch of the group, and she instilled all the wisdom and knowledge into the women. It would go down the chain, So they had their own modes of power. And then the men, of course, same thing. Men very rarely mix with the women unless it was like for obviously coming together to eat or helping, like, say, one of the farm animals, it's time to go. So the men would take care of that portion of it, or the women. I remember my grandma would just take a chicken and cut its head right off. No, oh my God, blood. No, oh my God, bugs. Nothing, none of that. The women were exactly how she's describing, just completely different. Hardy is one word you can say it. My grandma and the women, of her age and aunts would make some American men like sissies. And I shouldn't even say American men, the Western men, because even Western Europeans. So these new age feminized men, complete sissies. Like, I can't hand a guy a knife and say, cut that chicken's head off.
Some of them will cry.
Yeah, some of them will cry. I just like to have a kind of toast.
I can't do that.
And then they cut it, blood splatters on their face, and they're like, bleh, and they just throw up, start shaking. This is what men have become, and of course women are just naturally unhappy when you're around that kind of corrupted energy of what a masculine man is. There's no
balance if you're a feminine presence too.
Right. If you're a feminine presence and you're around that, you're disgusted. Now you have to assume a masculine role, and that's not your role. So I know what she's saying when she says that we're in this weird experiment where we have started mixing two worlds and we have no idea what the repercussions of that is. We're barely seeing them unfold right now, like men and women in the same place, learning in the same classrooms. It's affecting boys worse. At work, gender pay gap myth here and there, performance reviews here and there. Men focus on things, women focus on people. We just work differently in our brains. People can't accept that. The wokest society on the left can't.
Something doesn't feel right, but we make it man's fault.
Right. It's always a man's fault. I just stop blaming all the men, for women's problems, because now women have more freedoms than they ever have, and they're unhappier than they've ever been. And even when you go to the most egalitarian societies, like some of the Nordic countries that exactly have the most equality, women, they're even more disproportionately separated. More nursing, men more in engineering, physics, stuff like that. No matter what you do and how much choice you give women, it seems like they go in the opposite direction.
The only reason it doesn't make sense to them, though, is because they completely ignore the biological aspect,
Exactly.
like she said.
It's not taught in schools anymore. So when you do women's studies, gender studies, the last thing you do is biology. Oh, sorry, it's not even the last thing, because it's not even there. It's non-existent. You do everything but the very one most powerful indicator of how you will go about your life, your biological gender, and all that entails.
Yeah, I saw another interview with her where she described how these departments in these colleges were formed, and it was just during the women's rights movements, the colleges felt pressure to create these departments and just picked random women from literature departments, put them together and said, okay, do women's studies.
Make it up.
Right.
Yeah, it's a complete mess. And again, hijacked completely. All the administrators, like she was talking about, the Stalinist-esque fake postmodernist, I'm just an elite making multi-millions of dollars, far more than any of the professors there. The faculty can't speak up. You'll get canceled, or your tenure is on the line.
The so-called leftists that cannot relate to any working class person.
To none. Yet these are the people pandering to everybody. Like, the wokest ideas are, it's good for you, Yet they themselves are making millions off the back of these ideas that don't really affect them because of the amount of money they have. It's the luxury belief from that book.
They're insulated from the consequences of their own wrong beliefs.
Exactly. You can have all the stupid ideas you want. They won't affect you because you're wealthy. But you tell a middle-class person, lower class, to have these moronic ideas like, I don't need no man, blah, blah, blah. And now you get an explosion of single mothers right? An explosion of broken homes, an explosion of kids that are growing up right now completely messed up mentally. We have more and more people with mental diseases, illnesses. An explosion of all this has happened, all on the backs of this, because some few people with the financial ability to have stupid ideas. There's a book, I think it's called Luxury Beliefs, that goes into this. It's just a rich people's way of earning brownie points. Like, look at me, I have a cause for those plebs down there. I'm doing great work saving them. It's the savior complex of what you call the liberals today, where they feel like they got to save all the minorities and all this and that and the intersectional spaghetti monsters here and there and everybody that needs help in their own little box. I know better than you, and this is what you need to do better in life. Trust me, I care. Right? All to earn brownie points with the very rich people. They rub elbows, you know?
Right.
It's showing off their latest shiny metal. That's the new way.
The luxury to separate yourself from reality.
Exactly. That's what it is, man. The world's getting crazy. I hope more and more people wake up and see it.